Welcome to BTH with me, Dr. Q. Today I am joined by one of, I think, the most amazing people I've met in the academy to date. His name is Obakeng Kagola, and he is all the way from the Walter Sisulu University, or now the
Thank you.
university, as we call it. Dr. Kagola, greetings to you. How are you?
I am well. Greetings to you, Dr. Q. I am well, thanks. And how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. We're so happy to have you on BTH.
It's my pleasure.
Dr. Kahola, I would
hmm
love for you, before we even start with our conversation, which I think is very important, to just give us a bit of introduction about yourself. Who are you? You're based at the university, we now know that, but can you give us more about yourself and the kind of work that you do?
Wow. What a very difficult question or task that you are giving me to do. But anyway, so I am Dr. Obakeng Kagola. I am a lecturer at University Walter Sisulu in the Faculty of Education. Particularly, I'm in the Department of Continuing Professional Teacher Development. It's a postgraduate department. Um, the work that I do or my research is based on men and masculinities in the early years of learning. So, within the South African context, that would then be the foundation phase. So, we look at mainly my work intersects with masculinities, critical studies on men and masculinities, gender and sexuality in the early years of learning, and yeah, participatory and visual methodologies, particularly as a methodology for transformation and decolonial ways of thinking about research and doing research with participants and not on participants. Yeah, I think let me just leave it there. Thanks, Q.
Hmm. What about masculinities in early childhood education? What prompted you to look at this, especially from that angle?
But what prompted me, to be honest, Q, it's my own life. When I had a choice, I wanted to be a lawyer, by the way. And when I got to Northwest University, I was then introduced to early childhood education. But however, my grandmother was a day mother. So we used to have a lot of kids at home and we would be forced to teach them how to write and read and all of that at that time. But when I got to varsity, I then got introduced to early childhood, and that's when I did my first degree. And interesting enough, in that cohort of students, out of the 200 students that were in that cohort, it was only the two of us that were males in that space. So
Hmm.
navigating foundation phase teaching and the social construct that it is a feminine or a female profession slash space prompted more interest to me to want to find out why is it that men are not interested in this, why is it that there's few of us in this space, and what is it that we can do to change that, because part of the education system is to correct the injustices of the past,
Hmm.
which then speaks to issues of inclusion, issues of diversity, issues of social justice and inclusion in there, in a sense that we believe that schools are microcosms of societies that the schools are found in. Therefore, the from early childhood up until the end of basic education, there should be a true reflection of what is in the society in the school. So, in the foundation phase, if you were to maybe even remember yourself in grade R, in kindergarten, in your daycare centers, going up until your grade 4 or grade 6, you were only taught by females or women at that time. But having a mix of men and women teaching in that space for me created an exciting moment for me. Then that created a niche that I love, I enjoy researching because it is so complex. There is social expectations of men. There is men don't cry, men don't care, men can't nurture, and all of those social constructs. So, looking at how we reposition men in the current space became a more important aspect for me as a practitioner. And I tell you, Q, if given the opportunity, I would go back and teach grade
Hmm.
2, grade 1, as I did in my previous life. Yeah. So that's what prompted me to actually pursue research around men in the early years of learning.
Okay, that is very interesting. Interesting because we are often told that it is a woman's role to nurture and not particularly a man's. And so I wonder, okay, before I continue there, there's that thing that women have that just comes off naturally for them to nurture, especially when it comes to young kids. Whereas us, with our dominating masculinity, we tend to lack that which women have. And so I wonder if uh, we wouldn't come off as intimidating for kids in lower grades if we're to put
Mhm.
males there. Because I think having women in your foundation phase was always a strategic move. But then I see
Mhm.
again, it's not only you who is conducting research on this subject. I see your colleague, I think you've published with him as well. His name is Vusi from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Also writes about this. I think he's Dr. Msiza or Professor Msiza.
Professor Msiza is based at UNISA now.
Oh, okay. Professor Msiza, he writes about the male teachers' identities and how they've been sidelined
Mm.
within the earlier stages of kids' learning.
Mm.
And I really wonder, Obakeng, if that would not have a negative impact for the learners.
Mm. To be honest with you, Q, uh, it is a social script, a
Mm,
strategic social script that has always been there for decades and decades and decades. And it will take time for us to move away from it. And if you look at a child who is 2 or 1 year, when there is no one in front of that child, the child starts to cry, right? And
mm,
when there's people that are playing with this child starts to learn, oh, here is mommy, here is daddy, right? And what then that does, it teaches the child that if I cry, mommy or daddy will come running, or my siblings will come running, these people will come running so that I don't cry. So,
mm,
uh, also with teaching in that space, you mentioned an aspect on intimidation. We are socialized to believe that men are dominant, men are violent, men cannot nurture, like you mentioned. But if we are to be honest, if we are to raise our boy children to start caring, to start loving their children or children that they are with and see themselves as equals to the others, we then start creating a balance between what we mention as male and what we mention as female. Yes, there are biological differences between a male and a female, but in terms of how we feel, for example, love. When you speak to someone and you say to them you love them, it is you declaring your feelings for them. And
mm,
also with your female counterpart, if the feeling is mutual, the person will also say, I love you too. Meaning that we are all raised to learn how to love. So we can all learn how to nurture. We can all learn how to teach young children. Yes. Men, if we're to be honest, men are more playful than women. And
mm,
that on its own, it's a strength that we can use to engage children at that level and also teach them alternative forms of being men and move away from heteronormative ways of thinking about masculinities.
mm,
You see, so yes, I agree with you to say that there is a lot of stigmatization, or there is a lot of sensitivity around the shift from that strategic social script of positioning foundation phase teaching as women's work, and that on its own has also other implication. For example, the profession being seen as not as a profession that is equivalent to a man's stature,
mm,
making early childhood education as if it is not a profession or a desired profession for men. But the reality, the world has moved. We've got females who are engineers. We have got females that are mine operators and all of that. And we are encouraging that to say women must move to previously male dominated professions. But we are not also screaming out loud to say men must also go into female professions to start learning what it means to care, what it means to nurture, what it means to teach a child from not knowing how to write and read to living at the end of the year knowing how to write and read. I must tell you, from a personal testimony, I taught grade R for two
mm,
years. And it was the first 2 months, it was so uncomfortable. But as time went on, the learners started acclimatizing to me, and I also started developing that love for them, that excitement to see them every morning. And at the end of the year, having seen these kids being able to hold a pen, being able to read their own names and say, because they would call me ma'am, having them to read their names and say, my name is Obakeng. It starts with an O, not an A. So that on its own creates a sense of achievement that men have been deprived of, and that
mm,
does not allow us to get in touch with our feminine side and our ability to show that we do care and we are able to engage critically on teaching and learning. Yes, there is violent experiences that have happened in schools about men participating in the early years, or in pedophilia and all of that. However, we also need to look at the bigger picture and the brighter picture to say we want to create citizens that are responsible. And how does that start? Is to create a schooling environment that is inclusive of everyone that is in the society. That is my thinking around your question around how uh, uncomfortable and how women are more nurturers. It's, for
mm,
me, I believe it's a
mm,
strategic social script that needs to be disrupted so that we can construct a new identity for this educational space.
mm. I mean, over
Yeah.
the past years, we've been seeing not only in your foundational phases or elementary phases
Mm,
of the education system, but also in your more advanced grades, we do see
mm,
males really acting violently
mm,
towards learners, males and females alike, and these have been trending
mm,
um, significantly. I'm trying to think of this one incident where I saw a kid literally just chasing a male teacher with a knife because he had had enough of the abuse that he had enjoyed in the classroom.
mm,
This was, I think, around 2024. And
mm,
so I wonder then, because it seems like, and you would know this because you're a product of Nelson Mandela University, which is one of the institutions that are very much centered on issues surrounding gender or gender justice in general. And you would know that the university speaks broadly about toxic masculinities and how to deal
mm,
with toxic masculinity. And in the context of men, and I will marry this with teachers, um,
mm,
the element of toxic masculinity cannot be separated from the individual. And of course, I
Mm,
say this realizing that not all people are the same, but
mm,
I'm generalizing because that is the norm. How do we, and also you write about carrying masculinities. So how then do we bridge between that toxic masculinity to what you call a caring masculinity?
mm, mm, mm. I must say, the reality is, when we started the interview, you mentioned something about how we are socialized as men,
Mm-hmm.
as dominant, as masculine, as strong, as those people who are regarded as disciplinarians. And that on its own, I'm going to just give a typical example. We always talk about the remains of apartheid on our people, to say we've got a lot of people that carry the scars of their great parents into this democratic dispensation, and their anger is validated on a basis that they have carried their families pain over the years. So, with masculinity also, with men also, we also need to remember that we are socialized to be these people that are not emotionally available. Then, how do we then as, prove our dominance? We are taught violence, to say you need to to put your foot down, whereas in the true sense of reality, we cannot rely on that anymore, on a basis that we are realizing that we need to engage differently. So, with the violence in schools, if you look at it, it is both from teachers, it is also from the learners, meaning that societally there is a lot that we need to work on ourselves first, before we then look at what is a man, what is a woman, and how do then men behave within a particular space to assert their dominance. And my going to your question on how do we then work towards transitioning from toxic streams of masculinities to caring ways of being a man, I always say it's the kind of research we do and the kind of
Mm.
pedagogical practices that we teach our students. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm a product of Nelson Mandela University. I also worked there, and part of the modules that we were teaching, it was life skills for foundation phase teachers, where we then engaged on what does it mean to be a teacher in that space, and how do you then transition, because part of that, it's looking at teacher attributes, the pedagogies that we translate to the teachers, the student teachers themselves, as they go into societies. But unfortunately, as they go into these societies are still rigid in terms of what does a man look like. And also, when you have or how does a man enact within different space? How do we teach? You would hear a lot of research talking about how do men teach and how do women teach, a comparison. But not a lot of research or a lot of community engagement speaks about how do we then blend the ways in which we enact our different pedagogies in making sure that we move away from toxic ways of disciplining learners, and to move towards more reflective and more engaged ways of disciplines within schools. And again, another aspect that in my many papers, you'd realize in my research, I use participatory and visual methodologies for two reasons. I want my teachers, my male teachers, to be reflective in their practices. So when we
Mm.
do research, we need to do research that leaves the participant asking more questions about themselves, their practices. What are they doing? Are they doing the right thing, or are they doing something that is not um, socially acceptable? Because we cannot say something is wrong because this person has been taught this thing. So therefore, somewhere, somehow, it is right. But however, they need to engage critically on what is this that I'm doing? How am I doing it different? I'll give you an example. Now at Walter Sisulu, we have Isithebe Samadota for male
Oh, that's
foundation
interesting.
phase teachers, yes, where we now having it's just a space for pedagogical reflections where male teachers come together, bahlale like ebuhlanti, and have conversations around their experiences and how do they engage with rage, how do they engage with pedagogy, how do they engage with relationship, learner teacher relationships, how do they then, because the generation is young and the children that they are teaching are somehow not even 20 years older than them. How do you then learn to subtly tell a learner that you are not my age mate for me to be pleading you? Because a lot of them, for example, one of the conversations that we had with these fourth year students, it was just um, an Eboshanti conversation on how what is the current perception, and a lot of our students were talking about how grade 7 learners see them as their age mates, and how do they then, not in a way that is violent, be able to tell this learner to say, I am here, I am your teacher, I am not here to be your boyfriend. So it speaks to issues of also navigating learner desires. What these male teachers also to say, how do these male teachers in their own right, in a way that is more inclusive, engage with these learners on who is your age mate and who is someone that you need to engage with romantically. So there's a lot that is happening currently, as you will see that the current teacher and the current learner, their age differences, it's not that fast. Hence, you would even recall, even yourself, people that were teaching you in your early years were very old. They were 2 years to retire, then they teach in the foundation phase. But now we want people that will teach these learners for them to be able to be able to read for comprehension, to be able to understand what is it that they are reading and what is it that they are writing and what is it that they are saying, because we are in a project to produce citizens that are quite responsible for their actions and the repercussions thereof. Hence, I'm saying the kind of research that we do and the methodologies that we use to research with men in society, it must be very reflexive so that they get to individually in their own ways start rethinking what is it that I'm doing and how does it affect me, the person next to me, and my future. And secondly, community conversations around the kind of citizen that we want to see later or that will take
Mm.
over from us. So basically, those are the two. We need to start somewhere, but those are the areas that I suggest or I think that it is important to not just go and collect data, but it is to generate data together with participants, engage them, and make them reflect on everything that they
Obakeng,
do. Mhm.
yes. Can you unpack those community conversations that you are alluding to?
For
Who should be driving those conversations with communities? And when you speak of community in this
Mhm.
case, who makes up the community?
Mhm. The community conversations that needs to start taking place. For example, the lot of violence in schools, and you'll realize a typical example: the Eastern Cape, in the last year, they rated the first number one on high rates. In not the first, one of the top five on child and teenage pregnancies, and
Mm.
the other learners. The majority of the perpetrators were the other learners. So now we are in conversation with DBE to say we need to start having conversations with the learners around safe reproductive health. Now we also need to have conversations with teachers to say, teachers, as a department, we've got policies, and these policies requires you to be a an in loco parentis to the children that you teach. Therefore, you cannot see a child as someone that is your punching bag or a someone that you would think you would have sexual relations with. Those are some of the conversations that we need to start having, or we need to continue having. Now, when we speak of who are the communities where the school is, if you look at Dr. Yamile's work, she was at Mandela, she left, she's at UJ. She was talking about girl led initiatives where in the Eastern Cape, the DBE, together with NGOs in communities, they then started having conversation in the communities about uh, menstruation, about how can as communities raise children together as it was before the democratic dispensation, and we lost that aspect to say every parent that I see is my parent, and therefore there's a need for mutual respect between me and the parent. So in her work, she argues that we need to go back to those engagements where there is always community meetings. I don't know where from your area where you come from. When I grew up, we used to have community meetings where the chief or the counselor of the area, together with the principal of the school, where the school is situated, there are conversations around school cleanliness and the community cleanliness. Um, School and community relations to protect the school as an entity that belongs to the community. So the sooner we engage with those, the more it becomes easier, particularly for our male teachers, to start also understanding that I am not just here for a salary. I am here to raise a citizen that is expected to be responsible, to know that every person that I meet, I must respect, and I must gauge myself to say, who is this person in relation to me, and to what extent can we relate? So those are some of the community of practices that needs to take place, that needs to happen in societies. And these initiatives are led, most of them, by the DBE that we in the Eastern Cape currently. Now that I came back last year, we held a symposium on inclusive education, and a lot of issues were around gender-based violence against teachers and learners. So it is, the sad part is, as much as we are saying uh, the majority of the perpetrators are males, but there are males that are also being perpetrated, and therefore there is a need to have courageous conversations around these engagements, be it in the school itself, the school and the neighboring communities, the pastors. If you were to take back on your days when you were a child, a pastor would be invited to your school to just come and talk to the boys. The clinic will be called to just come talk to the girls about cleanliness and how to take care of their bodies during their menstrual time and all of that period. So it becomes very important for us to go back to those partnerships and uh, resuscitate them if they are dead for most of the time.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
interesting that you mentioned all these things, and particularly interesting because uh, I recently sat in one of the research groups, and one of the things that came out from there was, most of the things that we are doing now as the next generation of researchers aren't particularly new things, but we are just
Mm.
resuscitating and bringing back to life things that we've lost along the way. And as you speak, you remind me that actually there used to be days where we would have to leave early from school during break time because there would be a school governing body meeting
Mm.
where
Mm.
the leadership of the school and parents, representatives, as well as the local authorities would be
Mm.
in school, deliberating on matters meant to advance the school and the community alike. There was that
Indeed.
cooperation. And um, as you say this, I'm actually getting goosebumps because I don't think that still happens nowadays. Schools are working
Mm.
in isolation, as is any other entity now. I don't know
Mm.
how we got to the silo mentality because that is not how we used to do things historically. But I want to go
mm,
back. I want to go back to some of the claims that you've made, and I want to juxtapose your thoughts
mm-hmm,
with work that has been written by your counterpart. Prof. Anthony Brown also writes about this, whom you've also published with, by the way. But I'll go back to Ubusi, Prof. Caesar. One of the things that he particularly, I think it's one of his latest, no, it's not his latest publication, it's a 2020 publication, where he talks
mm-hmm,
about male teachers saying that they don't want to associate with the foundation phase because they are then regarded as these soft and feminine beings.
mm,
And
mm,
for me, that again takes us a bit back because you have this individual uh, who now sees himself as somebody who is associated with something that is often stigmatized. So
mm,
how do you work around the stigma while we are still training our teachers? But also, how do they respond when they see that younger kids are emasculating them through
mm,
because one of the examples he makes in that particular publication
mm,
is a teacher. He quotes a teacher saying, "I don't like these kids coming to me saying, 'Hey, I like you,'
mm,
because
mm.
it sort of like takes away that manhood. Well, not manhood. I don't think that's the right word, but it emasculates him."
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Mm. No, you know what? To be honest, he was a teacher himself. I was a teacher myself, and we have been through that. There's a paper that we wrote when we were reflecting on our experiences as teacher educators in one of the special editions. I think it's a 2023 paper where we were looking at how have we ourselves navigated the different spaces. And one of the other things that we talk about, it's a reflective practice. And yes, at that moment where Elena says to you, "Hey, I like you," yo, look, this teacher is so soft. Uh, yo, lo teacher is playing Nawantana. Hi, Uimo, feel and there are so many that we've experienced. But from there, what we learned is that being a reflective individual, when you are to change a narrative, unfortunately, there will always be casualties. Hence, we speak to reflective teachers, and also it is it is in our pedagogical practices. Hence, I was saying teacher education needs to make sure that when we produce teachers that are going to schools, particularly male teachers or heterosexual male teachers in the foundation phase, they need to remember that it is bigger than them. The work that they are going to do is bigger than them in that they are now repositioning or reframing the the context. And in doing that, there will always be a level of discomfort. Additionally, it is very important that as male teachers go into these spaces and they are perceived to be feminine, to be emasculated, and not seen as men enough, the reality is to in Cornell indicated that the society will always create categories of masculinities, and unfortunately or fortunately, male teachers in the foundation phase, they are always in transit. They are always either between hegemonic and subordinate streams of masculinities, and therefore that is always an uncomfortable space to be in. And to be honest, in any uncomfortable place, there is that word comfort that you as a teacher, as a male teacher, I've seen a lot of them, and up until today that I worked with at Mandela in my earlier years, today they are so happy that they are still teachers. 7 years later, they are still teachers in the schooling environment, and also taking the time to use those moments as teachable moments for the teachers themselves. We always say ask more questions. Ask hence when we talk about research that is reflexive, is that we are saying teachers must go back and engage their learners to say, what do you mean when you say I am soft? Why should what is a gay person and what is wrong with being gay? I am not gay, but what is wrong with being gay? So that children also they learn to understand that we are living in a democratic space that acknowledges diversity, that encourages everyone to have or to practice the right of expression. So, how do we then create these spaces to become teachable moments for our learners? Is to always ask them more questions. What do you mean? Because some of these things they are taught at home, and we must teach them to challenge all of uh, these perspectives that always position men within rigid or toxic streams of masculinities. That's how I think about these scenarios that we've came across, and up until today, well, unfortunately, I'm going to use this sentence to say once you are in a space where you are shifting and changing a perspective, I can tell you, Q, it was uncomfortable for me to teach grade R for the first year. But the second year, when the principal said, Mr. Kagola, can we take you to grade one? I said, no, I want to stay in grade R. I taught grade R for 2 years, as uncomfortable as it was every time at the beginning of the year. But as the year progresses, the parents, the very same learners, they up until today, Q, I have learners that I taught when I go to Mafikeng. When I'm in Mafikeng, they would say, but Mr. Kagola, we see you. You were my great art teacher. I don't remember the learner. But the mere fact that that learner remembers that there was a man standing in front of me teaching me, that stayed in that child's head. And that child will always know that I must always challenge the status quo, ask critical questions, and reflect on what is it that I have as regarded as knowledge. That's my thought.
Mm, mm. You talk about different categories of masculinity being shaped by society, being shaped by your who's and who. And I got stuck there because I think about the different spaces where I find myself, where issues of gender are often spoken about. And I am remembering that the first time I heard the term toxic masculinity was by a group of feminists uh, that had gathered and were speaking so ill of male, uh, not necessarily males, but masculinity in general. And I'm just wondering who then drives these stereotypes, stereotypical remarks against males in general? Because it may not necessarily be against teachers per se, but by virtue that they are created against your males, would translate to males across various spaces as well, which would include your teachers. Where do we mainly see this?
Q, this is very like I said. We said at the beginning. You said it. It was a strategic, or it remains a strategic point to feminize certain things and masculinize certain aspects. Right. So the question that you're asking, who drives masculinities, who drives all of these streams of masculinities, be it caring masculinities, be it toxic
Mm,
masculinities,
mm,
masculinities in the margin, right? The reality is men would, women and children will approve or disapprove based on the context which they find themselves in. Kopano Ratele has spoken a lot about how women and children and other men in particular perpetuate a particular stream of masculinity within a particular context. For example, within the schooling context in itself, you will find that men are positioned in a particular way, the way men dress in a school. For example, in the foundation phase, if you look at teachers in the foundation phase, they don't wear ties. They don't wear high heels. Women don't wear high heels. They are always in techies, in flat shoes. Why? Because the context requires the foundation phase teachers to be accessible to the learner. And the kind of pedagogies that you find in that space requires a teacher that is going to be able to immediately sit on the floor once it's story time, immediately be able to roll on a mat with children during active play time. So now imagine, look, let us now imagine a man coming into that space. Now a man comes into the
Mm.
foundation phase as a context to be a teacher. Now you find there's a grade 7 teacher who is sitting there wearing a tie, formal pants, formal shirt, a suit, writing on the board beautiful notes. Whereas in the foundation phase, in a grade R classroom, I'm expected to wear techies. I am expected to be in tracksuits so that I am able to transact pedagogy in a way that my learners um, are able to understand what is it that we are doing. Therefore, in that space, children then tend to do what? Indirectly approve that kind of male practices. Contributing to what? To the holistic being of this man. So if someone was to come into a school and ask for a teacher, and I am there with my tracksuit, and you are standing there with a suit, they will approach you because they think you are the teacher and I am a gardener or a person just passing. The way in which we dress is also a typical example of how women and children and other men determine, particularly men that do not fall within the context of heterosexuality. Because they are always perceived to be within subordinate streams, that would be your LGBTQ colleagues or friends that we have, then they then position us differently and approve certain streams. For example, the example you gave to say, this teacher is playing with children. Oh, he is so soft. Oh, I love him. Because now they are positioning him where? Within subordinate streams. When you see the grade 7 teacher, oh, yo, that teacher is very strict. Have you seen how he dresses? He is very strict. You cannot just approach him depending on how we perceive what is dominant in that space. So, mainly, as Kopano would state it, he would argue that within critical studies of men and masculinities, women and children and other men who are not within heterosexual streams of masculinities would then be the ones that drive a particular narrative of what is a man, depending on the
Mm.
context. Yeah.
Mm. Interesting. And maybe as I conclude, this has been a very interesting conversation, by the way, and
Yes. Yeah.
I wish you
Indeed.
didn't have to rush. Uh,
Yeah.
but I want to then find out how do you engage policymakers? Because I feel like this is an important piece of work that you and colleagues have come up with. I mean, I look at
Mm,
what is published by scholars in UJ, yeah, Prof. Anthony Brown at UNISA, and also the professor that I've been making reference to at
mm,
UKZN. Oh, now at UNISA,
mm,
and then yourself,
mm,
of course. How
mm,
do you engage policymakers? And how do you make
mm.
this work known? Because I do see that it has room in South Africa's education policy.
We are busy with the DBE currently with uh, the likes of Liko Bottoman, who drives a particular department or directorate in the DBE, for example. So we engaging on how do we then reposition men within uh, the schooling space, the project of the Boy Child Matters too, Um, we also have currently, as we speaking, hence I'm quickly running to the airport. Next week we have Professor Divya Bana from UKZN. She is a phenomenal scholar in this particular conversation on men in the early years. We have a conference focusing specifically on men in the early years and their experiences. So we all, because she is a Sachi chair for childhood sexualities and early childhood. So we're looking at we engage with policy. There's always people from all these different departments. For example, when DBE, when ECD was still with social development, we would invite the Department of Social Development, we would invite basic education, we would even invite SAPs to say these protocols on child pregnancies, because for a typical example we find that a boy child impregnated a girl child, and a boy child is 14 years old and the girl child is 16 years old. So who was statutory is statutorying the other here, and how do we then deal with this complex issue? Because it is an issue of maybe the boy child was dominant or the girl child was dominant in that space. So in responding to your question, to say how do we then make this work more known, we are engaging on several platforms and also collaborating with colleagues all over to try and see how can we influence policymakers and government officials to say we need to not necessarily make men feel special in the space, but we need to always have a conversation with them to find out, are you okay? Are you surviving? But so far, with the ones that, because I remember when I was at Mandela, um, I had, we graduated more than 20 when I left in 2023. When I left, I really am proud of the many students that we produced on a basis that they are still teachers and they don't want to be leaderships in the schools that they are in. They just love being in their classroom and educating the child in that space. So um, it is more on how can we create conversations between uh, departments and higher education so that the conversation keeps going and it helps and us to understand the current teacher and their experiences, and how can we make the experiences of the child in that space also be seen and be heard, so that we create a schooling environment that is inclusive and that mirrors the communities where children come from.
Hmm, I see. This is very interesting, and I hope you really carry this to a point that you see something in writing in those official government papers. And I'm glad that you work with somebody like Mr. Bottoman, who I think is very well positioned for this kind of
Mm,
work to be
mm,
carried forward. But with
yeah.
that said, I thank you very much for this.
Mhm.
I truly appreciate you making your time, even though you had indicated that you are rushing to the airport. But
Yes,
I
sir.
do believe that this is not the last time we are seeing you in BTH, and we welcome you as a friend of
Perfect.
BTH now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really also enjoyed the conversation. I would love for it to continue further in the later stage. Maybe we could have a roundtable conversation in BTH. You lead the conversation, but we are always available to critically engage on issues of men and masculinities in diverse
Lovely,
spaces.
lovely.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.